Welcome to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. Ever since 2015, when Donald Trump announced he was running for president, the dishonest Democrats and their allies in the propaganda press have been viciously lying about him. But if President Trump was really as bad as we've been told, the so-called news media wouldn't have to make things up. Now, would they? New York Times columnist Jim Rutenberg wrote in a front-page article that journalists who personally opposed Trump had an obligation to, quote, throw out the textbook when covering Trump and become closer than you've ever been to being oppositional, end quote. And Rutenberg was quoted in The Atlantic as saying when it comes to covering Trump, quote, it's only fair to be unfair, end quote. I made a list of some of the biggest lies the fake news has told about Donald Trump, and I'll share that list with you on today's program. But understand that list is far from complete. I mean, this program's only an hour. There's no way I could mention every single lie the media told about Donald Trump in 1 hour. Some of these lies are complete fabrications by the media, and some are instances where the media reported someone else's lie as fact. Now, the former is inexcusable, but so is the latter. Today's activist press hates Donald Trump so much that they reported untrue stories about him with no concern as to the veracity of the claims. There's an old adage in the press that if it bleeds, it leads. Well, during Trump's presidency, that has become truth be damned. If it'll hurt Trump, it leads. And you can't dismiss that as a simple failure to confirm stories before running with them. No, it was deliberate. Very deliberate. Now, the examples of fake news and lies told about Donald Trump that I'm going to give you today are in no particular order. But I am saving the biggest one for the end of the show. The most common lie, of course, is that Donald Trump is a racist. But that false epithet is so frequently and broadly made and comes up so many times that it will be included in some of the individual lies being told about him. The fake news said Donald Trump called Mexicans rapists and murderers. That's not true. He said some of the people coming across the border were not good people. Some were rapists, and some were good people. But what you were told by the propaganda press was that Donald Trump said Mexicans were rapists and murderers. Well, he didn't. Hear for yourself what he actually said on June 16th, 2015, as he announced his candidacy for the presidency of the United States.
When do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they're beating us economically. They are not our friend, believe me. But they're killing us economically. The U.S. has become a dumping ground for everybody else's problems. Thank you. It's true. And these are the best and the finest. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East. But we don't know. Because we have no protection and we have no competence. We don't know what's happening. And it's got to stop. And it's got to stop fast.
That's quite different than what the fake news said he said, isn't it? And as for the claim that Donald Trump ever called Mexicans murderers, I don't know what they're referring to. Possibly it's something President Trump said about Jose Inez Garcia Zarate, who was the illegal immigrant from Mexico that shot and killed Kate Steinle on a San Francisco pier in July of 2015. But whatever Trump may have said about Mexicans and murderers, he absolutely never said they were all murderers or rapists or bad people. Ever. The media lied to you. And they poisoned the well with that lie because it cast everything Trump ever said about wanting to enforce our immigration laws and protect our borders as being racially motivated, even though none of it was. The fake news wants you to believe that Donald Trump hates immigrants. But that's ridiculous. 2 of his 3 wives were immigrants. He doesn't hate immigrants. What he wants to do is enforce our immigration laws, which by the Constitution he's actually required to faithfully execute. There's a huge distinction between immigrants and illegal immigrants, which is why every single story you've seen in the last 5 years about preventing illegal immigration has simply called it immigration. And that's also why every single story about Donald Trump not wanting illegal immigrants leaves out the word illegal. And they just say that Donald Trump is anti-immigrant. Well, he's not. And neither is the Republican Party. President Trump and the Republican Party are anti-illegal immigrant. But they're very pro-immigrant. Big difference. The news media has accused Donald Trump of being anti-Semitic, which is just crazy. His daughter Ivanka married Jared Kushner and converted to Judaism. And her children are being raised as Orthodox Jews. Does Donald Trump hate his daughter and his grandchildren? And he's been the most pro-Israel president in history. From moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem where it belongs, to recognizing Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, to negotiating normalized relations between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, Donald Trump has done more to support Israel than any president ever. Yet the fake news constantly refers to him as being an anti-Semite. The fake news told you that Trump colluded with the Russians to get elected in 2016. This is the big lie that launched the Mueller investigation and got the president impeached. Now, in this case, the media didn't create the fake news themselves. The Hillary campaign, in cahoots with Barack Obama, the CIA, and the FBI, created the fake news. But the news media said what? For 3 years, the fake news not only allowed unsubstantiated, and by the way, since disproven, allegations against Trump to pollute the airwaves, the papers, and the internet news sites. And they also reported from anonymous sources, so who knows if they're even real. They reported these anonymous sources making assertions that Russian collusion had been proven by Mueller, and that it was just a matter of time before the report came out that would expose Donald Trump as a traitor who was bought and paid for by Vladimir Putin. Of course, Mueller found no evidence of it whatsoever. Nothing. Mueller found literally zero evidence the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians. But the false narrative that he did destroyed, or at least distracted from, his presidency. For 3 years. And even after Mueller said there was no collusion, some fake news continued to report that there was. And of course, the fake news has been silent on all the recent proof that Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Brennan, and James Comey were all involved early and knew the allegations were false from the very beginning, but allowed and even helped push the story. Fake news can happen by reporting falsehood and by not reporting truth. And today's activists, posing as journalists in the propaganda press, are guilty of both. Even after it was proven that no collusion took place, the media frequently reported, without challenge or rebuttal, statements that Trump is Putin's puppet. But President Trump imposed the most severe sanctions on Russia and Russian oligarch friends of Putin we've ever had. Does that sound like something a puppet would do to his puppeteer? Not to mention that Trump ordered attacks on Russian mercenaries, not active troops, but mercenaries, in Syria in 2018. And somewhere between 100 and 200 Russians were killed. Does that sound like something a puppet would do to his puppeteer? Let's take our first break of the program, and when we get back, I'll share with you more examples of the fake news lying about Donald Trump. When the Mike Bates Show continues. Welcome back to the Mike Bates Show. This is Mike Bates. The fake news reported that Donald Trump has attacked Gold Star families. Well, Donald Trump attacked one Gold Star family. The parents of Army Captain Humayun Khan, who was killed in Iraq in 2004, attacked Donald Trump at the 2016 Democratic National Convention and on TV afterwards and on the campaign trail between the convention and the election. What was Trump supposed to do? Allow someone to lie about him and attack him just because their son was killed in action? Hey, I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Khan, and I can't imagine the sorrow and grief of losing a son, but that doesn't give you a free pass to participate in partisan politics and not be challenged by the candidate you're trying to defeat. It wasn't Donald Trump who politicized your son's death. It was you. And the media's biased coverage of your feud with Trump was shameful. The media reported that Donald Trump was responsible for the government shutdowns. Republicans always get blamed for government shutdowns. Republican President Reagan with a Democrat Congress, the shutdown was blamed on Reagan. Democrat President Clinton with a Republican Congress, the shutdown was blamed on the Republican Congress. Democrat President Obama with a Republican Congress, the shutdown was blamed on the Republican Congress. Republican President Trump with a Democrat House, the shutdown was blamed on Trump. The fake news always blames Republicans, even when it's really Democrats who refuse to compromise. The fake news reported that Donald Trump said the coronavirus was a hoax. He did not. He never said that. Ever. He said the Democrats' criticism of his response to the coronavirus was a hoax. Now, as usual, Donald Trump is very inarticulate. And his weird syntax and rambling thoughts often make it somewhat unclear what he's actually trying to say. And they completely ruin sound bites and quotes because he often deviates into something unrelated mid-sentence before returning to it and finishing the point. He does this even with prepared speeches. I sat right behind President Trump at a rally he did in Pensacola on November 3rd, 2018. I was 2 rows behind him and maybe 5 people away to the left of his lectern. So I could see his teleprompter the entire time he was speaking. And I spent a lot of time at that rally looking at that teleprompter and following along with his speech. And he would just deviate from it mid-sentence, ramble on about something else, and then go back to it and continue reading. The person operating the teleprompter would simply stop and wait for him to resume before continuing the scroll. Now, I give a lot of public speeches, and I prefer to work with bullet points rather than a script. So I completely understand what he's doing. I get it. I think a speech flows more naturally from bullet points than from a fully prepared script. Like right now, I'm doing this radio program from a list that I made. So in front of me in this studio is basically a bullet list of the fake news items I want to mention today in the order I want to mention them. But I don't go off on rabbit trails like Donald Trump does. I think the points I make are pretty clear and are difficult to take out of context or to misquote. Not so with what President Trump says. His speeches often ramble aimlessly, especially his extemporaneous ones. Well, that's kind of funny. After going down that rabbit trail that I just said I don't go down, here's a recording of what Donald Trump actually said about the coronavirus hoax at that South Carolina rally in February. I did not edit out his rabbit trail about the Democrats screwing up their vote count in the Iowa caucuses because I want you to hear it exactly as he said it. which is exactly how the so-called journalists and the fake news heard it. But that's not how they reported it. Listen.
With your help, we have exposed the far left's corruption and defeated their sinister schemes. And let's see what happens in the coming months. Let's watch. Let's just watch. Very dishonest people. Now the Democrats are politicizing the coronavirus. You know that, right? Coronavirus. They're politicizing it. We did one of the great jobs. You say, how's President Trump doing? They go, oh, not good, not good. They have no clue. They don't have any clue. They can't even count their votes in Iowa. They can't even count. No, they can't. They can't count their votes. One of my people came up to me and said, Mr. President, they tried to beat you on Russia, Russia, Russia. That didn't work out too well. They couldn't do it. They tried the impeachment hoax. That was on a perfect conversation. They tried anything. They tried it over and over. They've been doing it since you got in. It's all turning. They lost. It's all turning. Think of it. Think of it. And this is their new hoax.
Did you hear Donald Trump say the coronavirus was a hoax? No, you didn't. Why not? Because he didn't say it was a hoax. But the fake news said he did. Just last month, the fake news reported that President Trump said U.S. military personnel who were injured or killed in war were losers and suckers. But did he really say it? Well, if you believe the fake news, 4 anonymous sources said he said it. But many Trump officials, including some former officials who have been very critical of Trump, said it never happened. So who do you believe? Well, there's no way to prove it one way or the other. But that didn't stop the fake news from amplifying the allegation as if it was the nectar of the gods. The fake news reported that Donald Trump imposed a Muslim ban. There was never a Muslim ban. Muslims were never prohibited from coming to the United States. His so-called Muslim ban affected a grand total of 6 countries: Iran, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, and Yemen. Those 6 countries have a combined population of 182 million. The global population of Muslims is 1.6 billion. So 88.6% of Muslims were not prevented from entering the United States. Not only that, but non-Muslims from those 6 countries were also banned. Why? Because those countries are hotbeds of terrorism, or they have governments that are so dysfunctional that there's no way to know who these people are, what their histories are, and whether or not they are terrorists themselves. Muslims who were British, Canadian, Turkish, Israeli, and from 186 other countries were never prohibited from entering the United States. Why not? Because the restriction was not a Muslim ban. It was a nationality ban based on the security reality of what the world really is and not what the left's fantasy world is. There was never a Muslim ban, but that's how the news media reported it. But the fake news about a Muslim ban by itself wasn't emotional enough. Sure, it got Trump called a racist, even though Muslim isn't a race, but it didn't really get people as worked up as the fake news had hoped it would. They needed crying mothers and children to appeal to people's emotions. Well, it didn't take long before that story fell into their laps. A Muslim man in Michigan cried that his 75-year-old mother had died in Iraq because the evil Donald Trump wouldn't let her into the United States for medical treatment. How horrible, huh? The Muslim man was an American citizen. He had gone to Iraq to bring his ailing mother back to the United States. His mother was a permanent U.S. resident who had been living in America since 1995. She'd been visiting Iraq when she fell ill. So her son went to Iraq to accompany her on the trip home to Michigan for medical treatment. But when they got to the airport destined for the United States, they were denied boarding because of the evil orange dictator's executive order. And she died in Iraq the next day. Quite a tear-jerking story, huh? It was yet another example of Trump's unconstitutional recklessness, unnecessarily killing people, right? But there was a major flaw in that story. Yeah, Mom got sick in Iraq, and her son did go to Iraq to get her, and she did die in Iraq. But not only was her death not a result of being denied entry to the United States because she was a Muslim, her death happened, wait for it, her death happened before Donald Trump even issued the executive order that imposed the travel ban from 6 countries that included Iraq. Yep, that's right. The Muslim man lied about it. And the fake news ran with it without looking into any of the facts. Facts? We don't need no stinking facts. We got a president to topple. Furthering the narrative that Donald Trump was anti-Muslim, in November of 2016, shortly after Donald Trump won the election, the big media reported that he might set up a registry of all Muslims in America. And the narrative quickly became, that's how Hitler started with the Jews. Trump is following in the footsteps of Adolf Hitler. But what was the basis for the initial news story? Well, on Meet the Press, NBC's Chuck Todd was interviewing Trump's chief of staff, Reince Priebus, when he asked him if he could rule out a registry for Muslims. The news media, NBC and others, reported that Priebus's response was, and I'm quoting what they said his response was, quote, "Look, I'm not going to rule out anything," end quote. And that was what Reince Priebus said. But it wasn't everything Reince Priebus said. It was only the beginning of what he said. Listen to what he said immediately after that, which completely contradicts what the fake news said he said. Listen.
Can you equivocally rule out a registry for Muslims?
Look, I'm not going to rule out anything, but I wouldn't. We're not going to have a registry based on a religion. But what I think what we're trying to do is say that there are some people, certainly not all people, Chuck. Mm-hmm. There are some people that are radicalized, and there are some people that have to be prevented from coming into this country. And Donald Trump's position, President Trump's position, is consistent with bills in the House and the Senate that say the following. If you want to come from a place or an area around the world that harbors and trains terrorists, we have to temporarily suspend that operation until a better vetting system is put in place. Okay. And when that happens, when a better vetting system is put in place, then those radical folks, or excuse me, they'll not be allowed in, but then others will be allowed in, but only until that is done.
Now, wasn't that second part of Priebus's answer quite germane to the story? Priebus specifically said, quote, "We're not going to have a registry based on religion." But the story was that Trump might set up a registry based on religion. A registry of all Muslims. NBC even tweeted out the incomplete quote to give a false impression. It was a complete lie. And yet people all across America believed it to be true. Why people believe the fake news anymore, I don't know. I guess they just don't know enough to know they're being lied to. I'll give you some more examples of those lies when the Mike Bates Show continues.